Carson, what is going on? Excited to have you here on the episode. And what we're going to be diving into first is where we always start to kick off. What is something that you're experiencing with right now that you're really excited about when it comes to top of the funnel and your prospecting?
Love it. Morgan, good to see you again, my friend. It's been a while. This is my favorite time of year. So it's the beginning of our fiscal year. So we're in full prospecting mode. And every year I spend a lot of time studying what works, what doesn't, what do I need to double down on, and what do I need to get rid of. And so, really getting laser focused around our play execution. I've created a plan with my team. This is our experiment called Plays That Get You Paid. And in essence, what it means is I go around to every person that touches our market. There's 80 in total. And I want to understand, how do they get paid? What are their key metrics? What's going to move the needle the most? If I'm able to create dialogue with our customers that leads to specific wins in their purview, what's going to move the needle the most for them? And so what we do, I think there's a lot of sellers that will execute a play, and they think a play is I'm going to send an email to a customer and then I'm going to move on with my life and I'm going to get wrapped up in all the noise. But no, we actually develop a grid and a framework. So it's very targeted prospecting in certain cases because some of these are very surgical. And then some of them are very scale. Right. So there's things that we can construct around newsletters and webinars so that we can develop a demand generation engine for specific types of leads and around some of the conversations that our team wants to be having. So we've built that around all the pillars of what customers want to talk about and frankly, what resonates with them. So right now we're working with Plays That Get You Paid. We've developed a full grid and framework to really do relationship heat mapping and track play execution.
Plays that get you paid. Who came up with the name?
I did. I like to have these fun little zippy. We are very acronym heavy here at
Hmm.
Microsoft, so we always like to have these fun little zippy names for things.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. So you already started diving into it, but could you tell me about the top level overview strategy when it comes to Microsoft's outbound strategy and how you're leading your team, especially on the social selling side?
No doubt about it. So, really, Morgan, the way that I would also say that it's always in evolution, right? Because we're always trying to listen and meet our customers where they are at Microsoft. So, what I mean by that is several years ago, the way we were segmented was very account based, very geography based. But over time, as we've been able to have meaningful impact in multiple different industry verticals, we continue to not only verticalize, but sub verticalize. And I'll give you an example. So I've been in the healthcare channel for about 4 years here at Microsoft. And when we first formed healthcare or healthcare focus, I mean, it was not uncommon for one person to have a very large scale territory.
Hmm.
That's not effective necessarily when you're, finding all these niches and nuances in the industry. And so we've learned from that and we've continued to evolve. Just in recent years, we've formed sub verticals like payer and provider, and the electronic medical record organizations, some of our partners that sell into the provider space, and then the group that I'm in, which is our pharma and med tech. So we work with a lot of the med device customers and things of that stature. So a lot more vertical based than ever before. Now you asked about some of the social selling elements. And you know what's funny about this is when I started doing social selling about a decade ago, I came into Microsoft. I was recruited for a brand new role, and social selling was an anomaly. I remember, people saying, I'm not sure what Carson's doing. He says he's out prospecting on LinkedIn. I was building community around what we did because I was not technically savvy. My background was in advertising and telecommunications. I'm just a sales guy, right? But I started to really be intentional about building community around what we were doing. And our team was number one in the world out of St. Louis, 8 quarters in a row out of 120 markets, which is unheard of. But it only happened because of this diligent social selling process that we were doing to go out and find the relationships we needed and to develop and nurture relationships. And so, lo and behold, I started being asked to train groups. Those groups got bigger and bigger. We were training markets, then we were training countries. Now I'm in the digital sales training that all sellers and managers are required to take in Microsoft. I helped co-author it, and I'm featured. And I have a small cameo appearance in the movie that they planned there, which is kind of cool. But in all seriousness, the social selling strategy is really about what we like to call getting into other rooms of the house. I created this to solve a problem, Morgan. It was years ago, and I remember our executives. I was sitting at an event that we did in Vegas. And I remember them talking about, our biggest problem is we're stuck in IT and procurement. We've got to get into these other rooms of the house to really drive transformation with our customers. And I was thinking to myself, well, my goodness, these other rooms of the house, these business leaders are probably on LinkedIn for the most part. So I just started developing something that I felt had a mathematical probability of success. If I reach out to enough influencers and their influencers, I can eventually create that groundswell of influence within the organization. And I'll give you one last example. The biggest deal I've ever gotten from social selling here, I reached out to over 500 people in one organization, had well over 200 regular connections and contacts, and ultimately ended up with a 9-figure deal because I got the president. I was in his office the following week after taking over the account, met him on LinkedIn, gave him a copy of my CEO's book, highlighted some passages that I felt would resonate. And they weren't even thinking about us. They were thinking about the other guys. But we were able to show them what we had from a resource and an investment perspective, and that's what won. So our strategy around social is getting into the other rooms of the house so that we can execute our plays with the right stakeholders in the right way.
No, I love the thing that you mentioned, getting the other rooms of the house. I've never heard of that before. I think that's a great way of talking about it. I want to latch on to that a little bit more because you mentioned LinkedIn is typically where people are going to live. Microsoft obviously in alignment with that, but are there other channels that you saw success with when it comes to social selling?
Yeah, I love the question. So, look, as a seller, I think great sellers, we have to gravitate toward things that are going to arm us with the information and the knowledge that we need in order to show up with value to our target customers. And then the next question is, where's your target customer? Right. So for me, LinkedIn was an obvious one to go out and find these customers. But unless I had something meaningful to say, why in the world would they want to talk to me? Well, the value that I realized that I could bring was I could help demystify a lot of what they already owned. You see, when I started calling on Microsoft customers at the beginning, the logo didn't open the door for me automatically. A lot of people were like, "Hey, you're one of the biggest checks we write," or "We're with this competitor, and we're not even thinking about you." And so the logo didn't immediately open the door for me. So I had to realize, where are these folks and how can I show up with perspective? So I'm going out, I'm subscribing to business journals when I covered the St. Louis market. I'm subscribing to email alerts. I'm subscribing to every industry trade magazine I can find. I've been in healthcare the last several years. I subscribe to 6 different healthcare online publications so that I always have information at my fingertips. And if I see something, I can be proactive rather than reactive. If I see that there's M&A, if I see there's a C-level change, that helps me be actionable. And you can see these things any number of places. Sales Navigator is huge because you can cultivate your own feed. But some of my greatest deals were when I saw a new executive was named and I was first in his office amongst all the competitors. My favorite one was when they were looking at, they had 6 different silos of their business and all
Yeah.
6 of them were with different cloud companies. And I managed to get first in his office. He was moving from another state. I offered to help him in looking for a place to live and a place to, send his kids. And got in his office the next week. We were talking shop. I aligned with what he was looking to do from a business perspective. I asked him to describe his perfect partner. And I just lived by that. And I
Yeah.
would always remind him of that conversation. So those are the types of things that I think are super important. Think about where your customers are and intentionally be there. Think about where they're getting information and intentionally be there. And the last thing I would say I've learned a lot about this year is the power of commenting on your target prospects' posts. Going out on LinkedIn and engaging. I've gotten more meetings this year, meetings that nobody could get just by going out and commenting on their posts. Don't ask for the meeting right away. Let that nurture for a little bit so you build that brand familiarity. They knew who I
Mhm.
was.
Right.
And I've even traded book recommendations with the senior executives of target prospect companies in their posts. And then months later, asked for the meeting and got it.
I think that's a really good call out that you had, and a lot of people don't realize this. And yeah, maybe you're prospects aren't posting and you're not commenting, that's fair. But this is something to pay attention to because there's probably people in your space that are posting. Latch onto that, get known, and other people that are viewing that post will also see your comments. It's not just the person that you're commenting on, it's the people that see that comment too. So I think that's a good call out. Now, before we go into like how you're tracking this for success, I want to go back real quick. I know that you're leading a team and you're also selling, so you're in a very unique spot for your team. How do you segment the team? Is it everyone is just any vertical, or there are multiple verticals? Like, how are you looking at your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that things are structured today, I have a team of sellers and technical specialists, and then there's also folks that are our extended team. So I have peers that lead teams that support us from a different solution area. So obviously, Microsoft's a big, multifaceted organization, right? There's several different buckets where our teams are compensated, from applications to cloud to Office 365, right? So each of those has a seller or sellers that are dedicated to our market. So the way that that's segmented, when we sub-verticalized, we made the very conscious decision to say, hey, it's not going to be in our best interest in developing some of these customer relationships if I've got the same guy calling on the payers, the providers, the med device companies, the electronic medical record companies in a given day. Let's get really good in some of these specialized areas. So that's the beauty of the team today, is that they are segmented by what subvertical are they calling on. And that helps us get really good around what we're trying to accomplish.
No, I love that piece. And so, what you're trying to accomplish is obviously you have metrics that you're looking to hit. If someone's looking at social selling, they may like, okay, Carson, do I make like 2 posts a day? Do I do like 5 comments a day and call it quits? Like, how are you gauging these metrics when these social channels are a little bit harder to gauge?
Yeah, that's really important question. So first off, we've got a full playbook grid. I kind of borrowed this concept from a couple of people that I worked with when I was an account executive, and I replicated it with my team. And the goal was not to create a spreadsheet for spreadsheet's sake, because I think there's a lot of tools. There's sometimes some discombobulation that happens when there's too much noise. So the goal was to create something that we would reference every day. Like the ID code of a customer, or who some of the key partners were, or where's the white space, right? Having that all in a grid so that we can check it every day, and I can go down my list and say, what do I need to do, right? We'll track relationship heat mapping. That's going to be key. I task my team every year with saying, hey, who are the key relationships that we're going to need in order to do what we want to do? And you made an astute point, Morgan, because frankly, not all of our target prospects are out there posting. But guess what? Just because those influencers aren't posting, their influencers might be. So that's how you create that groundswell of influence. I may not be able to get my target prospect, that CEO, CFO,
Sure.
CISO, right out of the gate, but I guarantee you I can get their VP or their deputy or somebody else on the board. And eventually I can get to whomever I want. I've done it many, many times over the years. So I think that's important, is tracking the relationships. Do we have the relationships that we need to win? Next, progress on executing key plays. As I mentioned, I go to my team, and the reason that it's called Plays That Get You Paid, that gets their attention. If they know that
Mm,
I'm out there prospecting to do things that are going to get them paid, guess what? They're going to want to help me do that.
of
So
course.
I'm going to track how we're progressing relative to these plays. So we construct a play, and that could be, we send, an email out with some smart links embedded in it so I can get some telemetry off who clicks what. It could be a webinar that I do. It could be a newsletter. I've even gone so far as to having customer executives on my own podcasts, and doing that to develop the relationship. We're not talking about selling anything. But
Mm,
guess what happens as a result of that is that now they start to take a look. We talk shop, and we might embark on doing some kind of pilot or proof of concept based on what fits in their purview, because now we have a relationship. So looking
exactly.
at any way that we can execute those plays. And then I would say I would break it down even further by play executed. When did we execute? What are the responses that we got? Leads that have come from these outreaches like webinars and newsletters. What's the follow up activity? And then pipeline generated. It all comes down to outcomes.
Yeah, I like the way that you're looking at the entire organization and seeing what you can do to dive into that and get the most out of those relationships. Um, Kind of want to dive deeper into this before we shift to something different. When you're looking at these relationships that you're developing through social and things of that nature, you're getting them on the podcast, etc. There are people probably that want to do this strategy. What suggestions would you give sellers, sales leaders that are looking to get their pipeline on podcasts and maybe they don't run a podcast?
Yep. You said something earlier that resonated with me, Morgan, and it was about the fact that, how do we start? Do we go out and we just make a couple of posts? Do we do
Mm.
this and that? I've never had anybody send me a PO to my LinkedIn because I made a stellar post. The stellar posts are important because they build brand awareness. And guess what? Your target prospect, they're going to research you. And so you do want to make sure that you're posting things that are commensurate with your brand. What do you want to be known for? But you also want to be intentional about thinking, how can I leverage my strengths, my passions, my unique superpowers to make my customer a winner or my team a winner? That's what it's all about. Because guess what? If your customer wins, you win. If your team wins, you win. So I go out and I try to figure out, how can I deliver a win for these people? That may not always be the obvious thing. It may not be cutting their costs. It might be, I can amplify their message. I didn't have a podcast either. In fact, I kind of rebuffed the term. I remember it was at the beginning of the pandemic. I was actually commiserating with a friend of mine. I was like, man, I really miss just sitting around talking about sales and leadership, because it was in the beginning of the pandemic and we couldn't see anybody. And then I realized I can do that with anyone at any time, anywhere in the world. There's power in that. So I started just recording conversations and posting them, provocative questions intended to start a conversation with my audience. And people were reacting and responding, through the roof. And it was amazing. People would start asking me, can I be on your podcast? I'm like, I don't have a podcast, and I don't want to use that term because it implies commitment. But then eventually I embraced it, and I started thinking about, this podcast isn't about me. It's so that I can learn from all of these other people that have this unique perspective. So I've used my podcast as a conduit to learning. And I think that's the key element, is look at what you're passionate about, what you like to do. Maybe you're not comfortable with video. Frankly, I wasn't years ago, but start to think about mediums that are available to you, that you're comfortable with, that could engage target audience, and just try things. Put one foot in front of the other. Take a balcony view. I like to tell people to take a step back and really be intentional about what you're looking to achieve. But those types of things, I think, can really engage an audience in ways that you may not even be thinking about today.
Yeah. I really like that breakdown, and kind of want to get into something deeper, which is like, what is your like best advice, something that super insightful you want to give to sellers right now when it comes to outbound, to refine their strategy?
Yeah. First off, look at your strategy. What's working.
Yeah, because most people probably aren't doing that. That's actually a good
It's
point.
so true. I'm very intentional every year about studying. I am a student of selling, right? You know what I loved most about some of the greatest competitors of all time? This year I've read Winning and Relentless by Tim Grover, and he trained Michael
Oh, it's
Jordan, Kobe.
phenomenal.
Phenomenal books. And you know what it really got me ingrained in, Morgan, was being a student of the game. You've got to study what works, what doesn't. And I don't care how fun the stuff that doesn't work is, you got to get rid of it if you want to be successful. And so studying the stuff that works and really leaning into that, what I've been intentional about doing this year is looking at, okay, I've got built-in compelling events, right, with customers. I've got renewal actions. So I know that I need to, first off, that's guaranteed revenue, most likely in a lot of cases to some degree. How can I maximize those events? Because the customer is budgeting for something here. How can I make sure that I'm mapping things out from a timeline perspective to anything that is going to happen? Next up, how do I create compelling events? What's going to be the dialogue and the talk track? What do your customers want to talk about? Because they guarantee do not want to just talk about everything that you think is great about your organization or your product or anything of that nature. They want to talk about what matters to them. And I've isolated 4 key pillars that have really helped me to get any conversation I want. Optimizing their costs and their expenditures, optimizing their security posture. What can they do around generative AI, which has a lot of ringing bells right now? Everybody wants to talk about Gen AI. And then how can we partner better? How can we sell together in the market? If I use those 4, I can get any conversation that I want. So think about, what are those door opener conversations? What is going to guaranteed get the door open? And this may not be obvious or may not be easy, but as you start having conversations with customers, the ones that will talk to you, listen intently. And then when you approach other customers, you can say, hey, this is what my customers are telling me, that there's a lot of focus right now on optimizing and controlling and cutting costs. So I would think price protection for you into the future would be advantageous. Would you agree? That's a door opener right there. So being intentional about those types of things. The other element is, it's all about relationships and resources. What are the resources that you can bring to bear? And what are the relationships that you need in order to be successful? You almost need to simplify your outbound strategy and really be diligent about figuring out the relationships and the resources, the people and the processes that you need to execute to perfection in order to be successful. And then the last thing I would say is just how much I've learned this year about commenting on target prospects posts, how much I've learned about how you can take some of those door opener messages and turn them into a
Mm,
newsletter, turn them into a webinar. Don't just run a play once. If you think it's a great play, you got to figure out 10 different ways of running that play.
of
Who's the
course.
partner I can go in with? I even have relationships with competitors that are so good that, because look, my job is to be an advocate for my customer, an evangelist of my brand, but
Mhm.
I am trying every day to earn the right to be my customer's trusted advisor. I will go so far as to recommend, heck, I'll introduce my friend at the competitor if I'm not the fit. And you know what that does is that every time that customer comes to me, they know they're going to get the straight answer. They know
Right.
I'm going to take good care of them. So being intentional about those elements when it comes to your outbound strategy, think about all the people you need in the boat with you: internal, partners, customers. Think about all the ways that you can engage meaningfully all of those people and how you can deliver wins to them. First, you got to find out what is a win to
Of
them.
course.
But if you're intentional about all of those things, you can't lose.
Yeah, I love the breakdowns. I think anyone could do that moving forward. And we've just shared all the things that you could do in an outbound strategy and tactics and social selling, that tips that are new to me that I'm gonna try out that not everyone can do. And we're gonna end on this last note, which is commission structure. So what commission structure is your team on right now? And what guidance are you giving the team on what to do and how this should play out?
Commission's so important. We have a revenue based and a consumption based, contribution based, that is more impact driven. So what's interesting? So our revenue based is all into the buckets. So we in essence have multiple buckets that are tied to and aligned to our primary missions as an organization, and growth of our cloud business, right? So it's all tied to growth. And so those are cut and dry. You've got a revenue based incentive that our teams are paid on. The other element, and this is kind of what I like to call the hustle stats, right? The stats that don't show up in the box score, but the ones that are all the more important, and it's the ones around the contribution based, that are impact driven. And one of the things that I get really grounded with the team on every year around this time, because it's the beginning of a fiscal year, is I'll sit with them and really go back to role definition. And I'll really go back to the definition of high impact. A high impact player is somebody that not only is a leader amongst their customers and partners and their team, but is doing things that is being noticed and that is being able to contribute broadly across the organization. Now, there's some people that get opportunities to contribute very broadly within their teams. Some people that take and seize opportunities anytime that their skip level is available, or a broader organization can be shared within. So if you're presenting on a broader team call or a market call or whatever the case may be. And the last element is when you kind of get that otherworldly exposure, and you can build toward that. I think I articulated a little bit of how I've been super, super blessed, fortunate here at Microsoft, because I've been given a lot of opportunities based on the successes of this team. But you can make that happen too. That CBI component is really based on: are you high impact? Are you mid impact? Are you a lower impact player? And even a mid impact player, that's
Yep.
you're hitting all the buckets, right? High impact is you are next level, and we are very fortunate to have some of those. But the competition is intense, and it's amazing to work with such a group of high impact people.
Any lasting recommendations you have on commission structure and what people should think about in this environment?
Yeah, look, it's in this environment, I think it's really important to ensure that there is reward and recognition built into everything that you're doing. There's got to be some day to day recognition. I got a colleague of mine. He always says recognition's free, right? So there's some elements where you can be top of mind with your top contributors. Making sure that you're thinking about them when you release incentives, multipliers, things like that can get them some of those quick wins. Now, when you're thinking about a longer term commission structure, whether you're paying on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis, or all of the above, make sure that it's very in line with what are core pillars for your team, what's going to move the needle the most for your organization. For instance, we're all based on cloud growth right now, but we have it split up in different buckets that are all important, and they are weighted. There are different weights to those. So, for one bucket, it may have a 35% weighted attainment, whereas another bucket might be 10, 15, 20%. So be very cognizant of all of those elements, and also make sure that it's structured in a way that incentivizes the right behavior, because
Mm.
you definitely want to make sure that it's not constructed in a way that somebody benefits by selling a customer something that they don't want or need, or cramming something into a deal just so that they can get paid. I think that's super important as you're constructing the commission structure. But structure it in a way that pays for performance, but structure it in a way that incents the right behavior.
I love that. Incentivizing the right behavior is key. It was when I did training, people were like, "Wait, I want my team to do this," and I was like, "Well, you should incentivize them to do so with the right behaviors. Otherwise, no one's going to do it, right?" And whether it's social selling or prospecting or whatever it may be. So, Carson, thank you so much for your time with these invaluable insights, and we'll see you all next time on the next episode.